เสตุธัมมังอนุกัมปิมังปัจฉังนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะบุญทังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Okay, so today is trying out many things. The video recording. So I'm just going to look ahead, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm supposed to be looking. And I thought to change the pace. I was going to do some reading from one of the volumes that is left behind by, recorded by the Buddha. It's called the Connected Discourses. Because having a few people new to Buddhism, I thought it's time to introduce the Buddha's teaching as we're getting ready for the rains. So as some of you may or may not know, obviously the Buddha, during the time of the Buddha, there was no writing. So a lot of his discourses was just transmission by verbal. He would walk around India to give teachings to different practitioners. And it was only about 500 years after he passed away that these verbal kind of teachings was recorded down. And how it came about was that one of his attendant monk, Ananda, had this incredible memory. He would memorize all the teachings by the Buddha. And then after the Buddha passed away, he would recite them to other monks. And that's how the transmission was kept on going. It was an oral transmission that would, from people to people. And so 500 years later it was written down, and then 2,500 years we're fortunate enough to have it also translated in many languages. And this particular translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi is one of the better versions. It's very readable, and it's always very, find a lot of inspiration to read something that you might have think, 2,500 years ago, completely different culture, but yet so relatable, because obviously the problem in human beings hasn't gone away. Human beings being as we are, we suffered 2,500, 600 years ago, and we're still suffering now. Just different things we suffer over. But basically there's still a lot of stress and tension in daily life. Obviously having a human body, we still get old, get sick, we get separated from what we love, we have to be what we don't like, and therefore we suffer over that. And the Buddha has a lot of great teachings, and the Samyutta Nikaya, which is called the Connected Discourses, is one of the 4 kind of essential volumes, and they are grouped in different ways. This one is happened to be grouped by topics. So each chapter, there's a topic to it. And the chapter I'm reading tonight is from memorized, what Buddha gave these teachings to devatas. And so that's another kind of a Buddhist thing. You may or may not know if you're new to Buddhism. Devatas are considered like angels, angelic beings in the Buddhist cosmology. They exist on a different plane as human beings, but there are obviously different levels of existence in the Buddhist cosmology. And devatas are slightly higher than the human realm. And even though they have this kind of fabulistic, fantastical kind of background to it, the Dhamma that comes from it is very similar to, it's nothing different. It's about truth. It's about how to free yourself from suffering. So the Dhamma finds it very consistent. There's nothing that is strange or fantastical about it. So that's the thing that I found very kind of relatable, is that these teachings that he gives to these angelic beings, angels, also something you can apply in your daily life. So So I thought I might read just a couple of the different paragraphs that comes up. Okay. One is 110. And this one, you see different versions of it come up different places. Okay, so this one, the chapter is called Delight. As Savatthi, standing to one side, that Devata recited this verse in the presence of the Blessed One. One who has sons delights in sons. One with cattle delights in cattle. Acquisitions truly are the man's delight. Without acquisitions, belongings, one does not delight. So this is what one of the gods says to him, and the Buddha replies, one who has sons sorrows over sons. One with cattle sorrows over cattle. Acquisitions truly are a man's sorrows. Without acquisitions, one does not sorrow. So it's a great kind of side-by-side juxtaposition of the worldly ways and the way of the Dhamma. In the world, we're told, especially these days, have sons and relatives, to delight in that. It brings happiness. When a baby is born, we run around and we give cigars to the dad, we celebrate. But from a Dhamma perspective, a lot of the source of our suffering comes from our attachment to our sons, the attachment to our relatives, to our loved ones. And one good example to kind of reflect on that is like, we read that people have accidents, people get sick with cancers all the time. And it's, we're concerned about it. But it doesn't affect us anywhere near as much as our loved ones. If you get the news that your sons or your father or your mother has a terminal disease, it's completely different. And why is that? Because people dying all the time, these people matter as well. But for some reason, because of our attachment to them, we suffer much more because our loved ones are affected by the cancer. So it shows the truth that it is through our attachment that suffering comes from. It's the same. You can kind of replace cattle with cars. People think it's great to get a new car, to get a happy allowance. Gives you a lot of happiness. But the Buddha says, with possessions brings stress and suffering and worries. And you see that once you get your new car, you've got to pay insurance. You can enjoy it a little bit, but you have to, the more you attach to it, the more you worry. Like I said, you park in the wrong neighborhood, then you always worry, are they gonna dent my car? Take my battery, take my tires away? Am I parked in a good spot? So there are lots of worry, anxieties over having things, because you have to look after them, you're protected. If you have things, you have less things, that is not a problem. So that's why the Buddha said, without acquisition, without belongings, you just not sorrow. And it's good to reflect, because most of us have been conditioned, no, it's good to have things. I like to have new things. That's what the whole economy is run on. Our consumer society is run on having things. Not just having things, having the latest things, having the best things, having more things. More is better. Although there's still reaction to that. Now there's a few people coming out with less is more. That, encouraging people to consume less. Because actually that's more of a path towards contentment, towards more happiness. So anyway, so this is one of the teachings of the Buddha to the Devatas. And what's the other one? Else it's a good one to read. So this chapter has to do with Devatas. He's talking to all the Devatas, the gods, the angelic beings in the Buddhist cosmologies. Okay, yes, I didn't read this ahead of time. Go. It's called stinginess. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, and at the Pindikas Park. Then, when the night had advanced, a number of devatas belonging to the Satyalabha host of stunning beauty, illuminating the entire Jeta's Grove, approached the Blessed One. Having approached, they paid homage to the Blessed One and stood to one side. The one Devatas, standing to one side, recited this verse in the presence of the Blessed One. And for some reason, these Devatas, they always communicate in verses. So there you go. So this is one of the verses. Through stinginess and negligence, a gift is not given. One who knows, desiring merit, goodness, should surely give a gift. Then another Devata recited these verses in the presence of the Blessed One. That which the miser fears when he does not give is the very danger that comes to the non-giver. The hunger and thirst that the miser fears afflict the fools in this world and in the next. Therefore, having removed stinginess, the conqueror of the stain should give a gift. Deeds of merit are the support for living beings when they arise in the other world. And then another Devata recited these verses in the presence of the Blessed One. They do not die among the dead, who like fellow travelers on the road, provided though they have but little. This is an ancient principle. Some provide from the little they have. Others who are affluent don't like to give. An offering giving from what little one has is worth 1,000 times its value. Then another Devata recited these verses in the presence of the Blessed One. The bad do not emulate the good, who give what is hard to give and do deeds hard to do. The Dhammas of the good is hard to follow. Therefore, their destination after death differs from the good and the bad. The bad go to hell, the good are bound for heaven. Okay. There's one that I thought it would be good to read. It's this one. This is about killing, because obviously, being a Buddhist, we're taught to, respect life of all beings. And one of the 5 precepts of a basic Buddhist, obviously, is not to kill any living beings. And so sometimes the Buddha gets asked a lot of questions regarding around this harming and killing. At Savatthi, standing to one side, the Devata addressed the Blessed One in verse. He's saying, having slain, what does one sleep soundly? Having slain, what does one not sorrow? What is one thing, O Gautama, whose killing you approve? So this day was being a bit kind of cheeky, asking, well, you're not supposed to kill. Well, is there anything that you can kill? Anything that you approve killing of? The Blessed One said, having slain anger, one sleeps soundly. Having slain anger, one does not sorrow. The killing of anger, O Devata, with its poisoned root and honey tip, this is the killing the noble ones praise. But having slain that, one does not sorrow. So that's the only kind of killing that the Buddha approved of, is obviously the killing of your anger or the killing of your defilement, killing of things that leads more suffering and stress. So that's kind of a little taste of kind of the different chapters in the Samyutta Nikayas. This one, like I say, it's in the Devatas. Some people might kind of connect with it. If you're a traditional Buddhist, the Buddha's talking to gods or talking to yakas, snakes is kind of part of the kind of the whole cosmos. But if you're kind of new to Buddhism, it may not kind of resonate so much. But there are different chapters, and that's what's nice about this book. You can just open it up and just read different parts of it and find inspirations or apply it to your practice. There are chapters on the 5 sense bases, Buddhist teachings on how to relate to hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. Those are the 5 sense bases that might kind of work for some people. There's also chapters on a right view. There are chapters on the 5 khandhas, which is the 5 groups of grasping that the Buddha divided the body and mind. You know, he divided complex body of mind of ours into kind of physical body, and then feelings, perceptions, consciousness, and your mental formations, your willpower. So, and there's also obviously teachings in details on the 5 khandhas as well, that you can also, people inclined to also can read those technical things. And there are also chapters on the 7 factors of enlightenment. So there's a lot of sometimes technical stuff, but sometimes also core teachings for a person who wishes to kind of look deeply into the Buddha's teaching. It provides kind of a technical, theoretical framework to look at your own experience, this experience of body and mind, how to relate to things, and also how to cultivate different spiritual kind of qualities to understand or to help you look at your practice, look at the body and mind complex that we have. Because I know during these reigns, there's a lot more time for practice, and some of that is encourage people just to do some, not a lot of study, but do some reading of the suttas, some reading of the different meditation masters about their practice that could sometimes inspire, encourage you in your own practice. And of those, sometimes in the Ajahn Chah tradition, we're taught that put the books away, shouldn't read too much. And while most of it is true, it's not bad occasionally to to have some reading, to have some grounding in the text. Yeah, because sometimes it's like I said, as long as you're reading for the purpose, of just inspiration from seeing, how people deal with their own defilements, or some, core teachings of the Buddha that all Buddhists, or serious Buddhists anyway, should at least have a grasp or understand or be introduced to. The concepts of like the 4 Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, 7 Factors of Enlightenment, the 5 Spiritual Qualities, the 5 Hindrances, mentioned the Eightfold Path already, the 4 Spiritual Powers, 4 Noble Truths. Yeah, those are kind of, if you are living in the monastery, if you're undertaking any kind of training, those are kind of the basic core teachings that at least to be familiar with anyway. Obviously, they can be very detailed, and there's lots and lots of books that people write. You can write your own PhD on it. But it's good just to have a basic understanding when people talk about it. They're like, oh yeah, that's what they're mentioning. The 5 khandhas, the 12 dependent origination concepts. So these are like a lot of concepts, but teachings of the Buddha left behind. And while, when I encourage you to kind of just read them as a conceptual basis, usually they have a lot of practical things that we can apply to as well, to understanding our experience, understanding, how do we create suffering for ourselves, and how do we transcend that? Usually the suffering is from a sense of self, we were discussing the other day. Sense of self through views and opinions, sense of self through misunderstanding this body of ours, thinking it is ours. A lot of times a sense of self. And the thing that we kind of trying to understand is that if we have a sense of self, that sense of self will also project outward. So we think we have a self, and then we'll think other people will be other selves around them. And a lot of times there will be a lot of suffering involved and stress around that. A lot of arguments. But the less of a sense of self you have, the less of argument, less you understand that there's nobody really out there either. Sometimes you're sitting here going, getting angry, irritated that someone mistreated you, someone causing you suffering. Someone call you names. So-and-so is really annoying. They're out to get me. They're out to hurt me, to make me miserable. But then when you understand the teaching of the Buddha, realize that if you're not in here, which is what the Buddha is always reminding you, there's no self. There's no self in this thing, body and mind. Then there's also no self out there. There's nobody out there who's really after you, who's really trying to make you suffer. They're also conditioned. They're also, acting on their own impulses. They're also acting on their own delusion. And they can't help it to a certain extent. They're also suffering. So by understanding that, you don't take things so personally. You understand that, even if they say something obnoxious to you, even if they do things that you get annoyed at, you realize that, you know what, they're also conditioned. They're also can't help the things that they do or things that they say at this time. So not to hold on to that, not to take it so seriously. And the less of a self you have, obviously the less that you have to worry, have to think, have to protect your reputation, your ideas. You realize that these things are conditioned, they come and then they go. There's nothing here permanent. There's nothing real to protect on anyway. And hopefully it is through not just reading the books, not just through understanding like intellectually, but through the practice that we really transcend suffering. And it's through putting Buddha's teaching into practice that we can realize the end of suffering, that we can transcend the stress that we create ourselves. Or we can understand suffering enough to let it go, to release it. It is through attachment that we create suffering for ourselves and others. So on tonight, I thought, don't know if that was helpful or not, but I thought it's kind of a change of pace, just to encourage people to do a bit of reading of the Samyutta Nikaya, which is the volume on the connected discourses. Also to at least to explore, the teachings of the Buddha, to see what he has to say. And I'm always amazed how kind of relatable it is, how kind of modern it is, that you can apply to your life in this day and age. And it points to the power of the truth. And humans, like I said, we haven't changed all that much in the last 2,500 years. We still have families, we have kids, we grow old, get sick. Yes, there's no iPhones back then, there's no internet dating, but basically human beings are pretty much the same. And it is back then, it is here. And whether you're Indians, Thais, Sri Lanka, pretty much the same. We're born, we grow old, we get sick. But hopefully we all also have the potential to realize the end of suffering, the potential to understand our suffering, and hence to transcend it. So that's what's on offer with the Buddhist teaching, that's what's on offer in this monastery, and I hope you make the best of it.
Annamayam Dhammakathayo Sadhukaram Dharamase Sadhu